Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf, the podcast. A serial killer drama.
In the latest series, we're off into World War I and the Battle of Mons, where there happened to be the Beast of Mons. Wonder what that could have been. Oh, and by the way, go check out the description for all the things you can do with Werewolf the podcast. Yep. Yeah. Enjoy. Bye. The sun was a pale smudge behind the grey veil of a gunmetal sky as Major Simon de Montfort rode his dark bay gelding through the churn fields of Flanders. Once green pastures were now a soup of mud, cordite and sadness, the usual aftertaste of a British retreat. His boots, once polished to a gleam by a very hopeful valet in Dover, were now dirty and dishevelled with the journey. Maddeningly, they had developed a squeak when dismounted in Boulogne. He wore the khaki of the British Major, a much better colour choice than the bright reds and blues of past campaigns. The collar of his finely tailored greatcoat was turned up against the wet air.
"Come on, Beefy,"
he said to his horse as he tapped it gently on the flanks with his heels. In his saddlebag he already had remnants of his last job. It was the head of a Prussian necromancer who had an inflated ego but an unfortunate allergy to silver, which, led to his head being in the bag. Simon had kept the man's noggin, as it wouldn't shut up once it had been removed from his body. In fact, it was so talkative that it was now gagged, bound, and would be taken to someone who understood its infernal language when he got back to, wherever he needed to get back to. Simon smiled.
"Early days as well,"
he said to the horse, giving it a quick pat.
"War brings out all the bottom feeders of the occult world."
He smirked.
"Anyway, it'll all be over by Christmas."
He laughed bitterly, with a lack of belief that would be the case. His insignia pin was on his lapel. It bore a small, almost imperceptible brass pentagram and dagger. It marked him out from the other soldiers around him as something overtly special. It marked him out as a member of the,
spooky chaps,
as they called them in the higher ranks. He was a member of the SOS. To the British Forces top brass, it stood for the Special Occult Service. To the average army chap, the SOS stood for those who will save our souls. Whatever it stood for, those who knew what it meant saluted him differently, as if wondering whether he ought to salute or cross themselves. Most did both. In the distance, the field hospital crouched in the mud like a collection of sulking laundry. The air of the camp smelled of blood, lie and death. All hope had sort of been recently kicked in the teeth and cast out as lost. British defeat was, and has, an odd taste. Stretcher bearers moved with the urgent gait of men long past the point of caring how many horrors they'd seen before breakfast. Those same horrors would not disturb Simon. He'd been on untold numbers of battlefields through the centuries. He was used to the result of war, in all its forms. At the field hospital, Simon dismounted and landed with the squelch of boot-impacted horseshit that made him sigh.
"I suppose that was inevitable,"
he muttered and patted the horse he called Beefy. He smiled at his horse. Beefy looked, far more intelligent than the officers he'd recently briefed. The horse snorted as though getting the joke, but he'd not voiced it. Inside the tent, he was given a mug of, for all intents and purposes, coffee, but it was in fact hot, watery grit in a cup. He spat it out and returned the mug with an unwarranted
"Thanks."
Rows of cots lay crammed with soldiers, groaning, twitching, staring and praying. One had already decided to die and looked rather smug about it. Hopefully he was somewhere better. There was nowhere worse. Simon closed those glassy, unseeing eyes as he passed the man's bed. Patient 47B, no name, caught Simon's eye. A Belgian lad with a thigh wound and veins now running black as tar. His breathing was all wrong. Not shallow, not fast, but it seemed calculated, like something inside him was checking for weak spots. Simon brought out his watch chain and the crucifix that was on its end. The soldier flinched away from it.
"Not good."
Simon turned to the attending doctor, a man with shaky hands and a look that said he'd recently seen a man with his own foot lodged in his mouth and not metaphorically. "He's not right," the doctor said. "He keeps whispering in Latin." Simon raised an eyebrow.
"Classical or ecclesiastical?"
The doctor blinked incredulously. "Does it matter?" Simon shrugged and gave him a smile.
Only if he starts conjugating verbs correctly. Then we're all in trouble.
A wasted joke in this instance. Simon stood by the man, a handkerchief to his nose, and opened his coat, withdrawing a heavy iron flask etched with the protective glyphs that were older than Britain itself. The doctor looked at him blankly. Simon winked at him.
You'll see. Not understand, but you'll see. Trust me,
he told the medic, whose mouth was open wide and displaying teeth that would make a dentist break down in tears.
Physician, treat thyself.
Simon said out loud. What? Said the doctor.
Nothing.
Simon soothed, uncorking the flask with a quiet hiss and wafting it below his nose. The smell was spicy like nutmeg laced with lightning. In response to the cork's pop, the patient's chest bucked. Its eyes snapped open, now entirely black, and that ravaged hole of a mouth gaped in a silent scream.
Ah, excellent,
Simon said.
You're awake.
The tortured transformation then began. Its teeth lengthened and fingers spasmed, veins bulged and writhed, and Audley shrieked and dropped his tray. Simon sighed and stepped forward and knelt one knee on the thing's chest with a forceful crunch, pinning it to the mattress like a butterfly on a board. He then deftly poured the potion on its brow. The effect was immediate. There was a sound like 100 bats being startled in a cathedral, and then stillness and silence and a final gasp. The thing was just a man again. Dead, yeah, but at least it was just a man. Simon took a sip of the flask, coughed and corked it.
Bloody raw stuff,
he said to the doctor, wiping his mouth with the back of a gloved hand and offering the flask, at which the medic just stared with that open maw of degradation.
Maybe not,
said Simon, turning away and pocketing the flask and brushing his gloves clean.
Right.
He muttered with what could have been mock bravado, but, probably wasn't.
That's breakfast ruined anyway.
The doctor stared pale and wide-eyed still. What in God's name was that? Simon paused, deciding whether to reveal the information to the man.
Why not?
He asked no one.
It was an incubi vectoric, type 4,
he said as he flipped open a notebook.
Battlefield carrion feeders. Prefer emotional trauma and high body counts. Think of them as spiritual rats with academic ambitions,
he said as he wrote notes in shorthand on the paper with a tiny pencil. The medic blinked.
My prescription for you and yours,
he said, pointing to the staff of the tent,
is to tell your men to burn any corpses that twitch twice. And if a corpse starts talking Greek or Latin or Russian, don't argue, just bloody shoot it.
He turned to leave, then paused, not turning.
Ah, and also, your coffee is dreadful. It tastes like an unholy combo of poison and vomit. Just thought you should know.
Outside, the drizzle had resumed. Artillery boomed again. Well, politely, from a distance, you know. Simon sighed, adjusted his cap and pulled his greatcoat tighter around himself before wandering back to the patient Beefy. He patted the creature and adjusted its tack, not for his, but for the horse's comfort, and then remounted. Before resuming his journey, he briefly looked back over his shoulder at the field hospital.
Well,
he said.
Another quiet morning.
The horse snorted, which Simon took as some form of agreement.
Come on, old chap,
he said as he made to ride on into the mud where the ghosts were, and into a war that hadn't even properly begun. Suddenly, a young private came running, yelling, and grabbed at the horse's bridle.
Annoying,
said Simon to the horse. He was going to strip the man to the bone with his withering wits, but when he saw the young man's eyes, the anger that had risen was soon calmed. The boy yammered inane nonsense.
Slow down, please.
Simon had to shout to be heard over the garbled words of the soldier.
I will listen, but only when I can bloody understand you,
he told the terrified boy. Yes, boy, he couldn't be more than 15 years old. A few pitiful hairs clung to the boy's upper lip.
Stop! Breathe, Private! Private!
The young man with the weary eyes breathed and settled, gulping in air. There are werewolves on the battlefield? The young man spat. Silence. He looked at Simon with not only the fear of what he was saying, but also with the fear of saying what he was saying to a major. Although a major of the SOS was not going to laugh in his face, Simon smiled at him, a reassuring smile, and leant over the neck of his horse.
Really?
Said Simon.
Please tell me more. Also,
He reached down to his pack.
is there somewhere I can make this?
He held up a small Hessian bag of coffee beans.
You see, I can cope with war and werewolves. But one thing I really can't cope with is shit coffee.
He said as he dropped once more from his saddle.
Bugger.
The horse snickered.
Major Simon de Montfort. The official account of what happened that day follows. The railway bridge east of Mons on that tense, heavy Sunday on the 23rd of August, 1914, was no place for glory. Yet it was here the Royal Fusiliers etched themselves into the stubborn memory of the British Expeditionary Force's first battle on continental soil in nearly a century. The bridge itself was a squat and functional thing of iron and stone. It spanned not just the canal, but the hopes of the French flank it protected. The men that day knew such. Orders were curt: hold the bridge at all costs. There was nothing romantic about it. The bridge had to remain intact and uncrossed, or the German advance, already pressing with unnerving precision, would spill into the heart of the British Expeditionary Force's thinly held line, and that could not happen. From the cover of sandbag positions and hastily erected barricades, the Fusiliers, men from London streets and quieter English shires, endured the opening notes of the first truly modern war. Shells came first, whining down with the kind of mechanical certainty that made men duck before they heard the explosion. And then the skirmishers appeared on the far bank, grey uniforms blending with the smoke and the dust. The Germans came forth with that relentless, almost tidal method that the British were only beginning to grasp. They were probing, then withdrawing, and then surging forward with bayonets fixed. Their NCOs barked commands like stuttering metronomes in the chaos, and each time they came, the Fusiliers met them with disciplined rifle fire. The Lee Enfield rifles were working in a rhythm and a drilled precision that astonished their enemy. Later, a German prisoner of war would mutter that it was as though they had faced machine guns disguised as men. That was how good the British soldiers were. For hours, the bridge was a fulcrum of the battle. Men fell and were replaced, not in the grand Napoleonic style, but with a quiet, grim efficiency born of grit and necessity. Sweat mingled with the black stench of powder. Messages came from Brigade HQ. But reinforcements were always somewhere else and were needed more urgently wherever they were. By late afternoon, with ammunition running perilously low, the Fusiliers held still. The German pressure had slackened, not broken, but spent for now. And still, the bridge stood. Behind it, the road to retreat remained open. That night, as the order to withdraw at last reached them, the Allies slipped away into the darkness, leaving the bridge to the enemy. They'd held it long enough. In war, sometimes, that is victory enough. Some men stayed behind to fight to the last. 2 Victoria Crosses were given in this first battle. They held the machine gun nests while the rest filed away into the deepening dark of the night. In the memory of the regiment, and in the understated annals of British arms, the stubborn defence of that railway bridge would remain as one of those small, essential stands without which greater disasters might have unfolded. Pure bravery by all. Altruism and a sacrifice of their lives for some. That was the story, and it's all true. But for the whole tale, we need to add a little more.
Simon followed the boy into a hastily rigged mess tent. Other soldiers were there in different states of dress and, sadly, injury. Tea and slop were being offered to them while silence held. These men needed to work through what had happened in their heads, if they ever could. Simon could empathise. He had been in the aftermath of this more times than he could reflect on it. It never got easier for him, to be honest. It just got easier to pretend that it was acceptable to feel like this. Simon had brought his most valuable piece of kit with him to the tent, mainly in hope. It was his coffee percolator, a thing of beauty and brilliance until even this was surpassed by the invent of the mocha pot in the 30s by the genius Alfonso Bialetti. He just needed a stove and water and all the coffee would be good. He sat now at the table with the boy as he filled his grinder and whirled its handle to get the perfect grist.
Now, tell me more.
Simon asked him as he worked.
I need all of it.
He reassured the private. I don't know where to start, he said.
Well, I get the gist of the battle. Tell me about the run-up to the appearance of the,
Simon said, making brief eye contact to the word.
The werewolves.
To emphasise the word's importance. Begging your pardon? Here it is then. It was the Vickers machine gun, sir. The crews were getting, knocked out one after another. He paused. Position was that tight, you couldn't so much as scratch your ear without hitting the chap next to you, he sighed. Soon as one of the lads went down, we had to drag him out before anyone else could get on a gun. And the only way it was across open ground, sir. Jerry had it sighted to be perfect, like. Anyone crossing was in God's hands, he was, he said, making the sign of the cross over his chest. A beautiful nurse, immaculately dressed, took a seat at an empty table behind the boy as he spoke. An enamel cup steamed in her hand. Lieutenant Dease, the boy continued. Simon interrupted.
Sorry, old chap.
He apologised for the interruption. The boy stopped and nodded.
Are there any women nurses here?
He asked the private. No, sir. Be a fine thing if there was. He smiled. Simon gave the woman a hard look. She in turn kept her head down, purposely not making eye contact.
Ah.
Simon said.
Interesting. Please, carry on.
He continued nodding and looking back at the boy. The boy nodded. Well, Lieutenant D, sir, I've never seen the like. Any time the gun stopped, he got over himself to see what was wrong. He went himself. Didn't send another lad. Didn't shout for help. He just went. Once, twice, more than a count, sir. Took rounds too while he was doing it. Proper bad wounds too. But he wouldn't leave his post. Stayed till one of the crew could fire, even when he could barely stand. Third it. That was it, sir. He went down. Deserves that VC thing, every scrap of it. The boy now ran his hands over one another and then hugged himself to feel some comfort.
Carry on, Private.
By then, sir, both guns was out and the crews as well, let's say gone. Someone called out, anyone else know the gun? And Private Godley stepped up. Didn't say a word, sir. He blinked, he just got on with it and I helped him. I did. Don't know why, it just felt right. The boy was obviously now in some distress, so Simon removed a glove, reached over the table and held the boy's hand. The look he received in return was warm and contained gratitude.
Carry on, my brave lad,
Simon said as he patted the boy's hand before passing his second-best pocket square for the boy to wipe away the tears. He could see the boy was embarrassed by his tears. Begging your pardon, sir.
You have nothing to beg for. Tears are fitting for such a tale, young man.
The boy blew his nose into the cotton cloth. It made Simon flinch in a moment of distaste, which thankfully the boy did not notice.
That was a bit much in a chap's hanky there.
What'd you say, sir?
Nothing of importance. As you were.
You pulled the bodies clear, sir. It was horrible, it was, and set the gun back up and started firing. We caught the bloody hand's attention quick enough, and before long the water jacket was shot right through, gun spitting steam like a kettle. Can't use it no more. Godly was it bad, sir, and the Germans were almost upon us. And, aye. The boy clammed up, staring at and wringing the handkerchief in his hands. Aye? A sniffle broke him. Again, Simon leant over the table. He placed a hand on the private's shoulder as the boy broke.
Hey now. You're a jolly brave chap. You held that spot and let many others escape. Come on now. That's a rare quality.
The boy went to continue, tears leaving clean tracks on that grimy face. If I may, sir, I've seen men do brave things, but that day it was different. Weren't just about orders or duty. Lieutenant Deason and Private Godley, they was something else entirely. Can't name it proper, but I'll not forget it as long as I live, and that's the truth of it, sir. That's the truth of it.
Yes, brave men. As are you,
he told the boy. He left a silent gap for the boy to fill. Simon said nothing, just continued to stare at once was a bleached white handkerchief, which was now a grey ruined rag.
Werewolves,
Simon prompted. The boy looked up. I prayed, didn't I, sir? Prayed with all my heart, I did, the private continued. And then she were there, weren't she? The boy paused. Proper beautiful she was, an angel. She were in our uniform too, proper reminding me of Sal from home, she did. Simon now looked at the woman at the table with a grim and bitter, knowing look.
Ah, I see,
he said, staring at her, daring her to meet his eyes. She told me she was a proper angel and that she could help me, she could. Just made me promise to give her one thing, just one thing. To give her myself, to give myself to her, she did. And I promised. Simon's look shot back to the boy.
You promised what?
He bit. I promised that she could have all my faith and love. After all, she were an angel, weren't she? I know it sounds daft, I know. The chill that now struck Simon's heart was created by more than the painful possibility of this boy's death. He felt true horror at the boy's words.
You promised?
The boy nodded. Now Simon felt true sorrow.
Oh, shit,
he said as he looked up to be met by a beautiful smile and a wink from the nurse that no one else seemed to have noticed.
Not good,
he said to himself, looking ruefully at the boy. What ain't good, sir? Asked the boy.
Nothing at all,
replied Simon again, raising his eyes to the woman who was not there. He smiled and shook his head at this.
Tell me, then what happened?
Well, sir, it's difficult, innit? It's unbelievable, innit? It's this gigantic sort of black wolf ghost thing walked through the sandbags. It were proper huge, proper big burning yellow eyes, but I wasn't more scared by it now. It actually made me feel better, it did.
Yeah, I bet it did,
Simon said offhandedly. Pardon, sir?
Sorry, I bet it did,
Simon said with fake enthusiasm.
Then what?
He asked, rubbing his neck with his hands and stretching it back and forth as if to try and release a trapped niggle. Well?
Well, what?
He said with evident annoyance.
I mean, please continue,
said Simon with a smile. I only became a bleeding werewolf, didn't I? Simon looked hard at his grinder, then back at the now beaming boy and sighed. He removed his cap and placed it carefully on the table. He smiled bitterly at the boy and then ran his hands through his perfectly coiffured hair.
Fuck, I need coffee.
Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf, the podcast, a serial killer drama.